My first book was The Blue Zones, Lessons for Living Longer from the people who've lived the longest. And now I followed up with a second book, The Blue Zone Solution, which really tells you how to take the secrets of the longest lived people and apply them to your life. I've come to realize that food is the runway into other health behaviors. We eat 3 times a day. People like to eat. Our media is so food oriented. There's a food channel and dozens of magazines on food, and it's just something the human species loves. So I decided to dedicate about half the book into looking at what and how the longest lived people eat. And then secondly, Blue Zone's sort of prime tenet is that we don't change people's health by modifying their behavior. I know that's disruptive, but if you look at the recidivism curves of diets, even exercise programs, they don't tend to last very long for many people. People get excited about, usually get a few months of adherence, and then they get off onto something else. But if you make permanent changes to people's environments, that can have lasting effects. And when I look at these centenarians around the world, none of them said at age 50, well, God darn it, I'm going to get on that McDougall diet and live to 100, which they might, by the way. Or they never get a treadmill in the basement. In all cases, longevity happens to them. It ensues. It's almost a residue from living in this culture. They live in places where the healthiest foods are most accessible and most affordable. They have time-honored recipes to make things like beans and greens taste good. Their kitchens are set up so they can make it quickly. They know how to make it. They've been doing it for centuries. Their social networks are set up so they're gathering around these foods. That's the big idea, setting up the environment. So the other half of the book talks about how you set up your own environment so eating the right way becomes easy. So let me first articulate the caveats and the limitations. So we found about 155 dietary surveys done in the past, over the past century in all 5 of the Blue Zones. So you know, when trying to find out what a 100-year-old ate to live to 100, you can't ask them what they're eating because they don't remember. If I asked you what you had for lunch a week ago Tuesday, you probably couldn't tell me. We know it's plant-based, but you probably couldn't tell me exactly. So you can't ask a centenarian what they were eating when they were 10 and 30 and 50 and 70 and so on. So we relied on finding dietary surveys, and the techniques back in the 20s and the 40s, though there is data, they use different variables, and it's hard to do a traditional meta-analysis, but we got help. Walter Willett helped us in the University of Minnesota, and we did a scientifically responsible distillation of all these 155 dietary surveys. It took 3 years, and I hired 3 researchers and blew a bunch of money to do it right, but we feel really good about it. So you look at these diets, and on average, over the past 100 years, about 95% of their caloric intake comes from plants. Only about 5% comes from animal products. Everyone except the Adventists are vegetarian or vegan. And only about 10% of Adventists are vegan, if you really dig into the data. They're eating some eggs, but only about 3 eggs per week on average. So not a lot, and not 3 egg omelets. They'll have 3, and they eat meat on average 5 times per month, and a portion way smaller than this, about half the size of this lavalier mechanism. Fish, they don't eat nearly as much fish as we thought. Fish, perhaps 3 times a week, even though a lot of these Blue Zones are on our islands. A lot of grains. A lot of whole grains. Rice is in Okinawa. Wheat, bread is consumed a lot in Sardinia and Okinawa. But interestingly about the bread, it's sourdough bread, which is vastly different than bread leavened with yeast, which is a fungus. Sourdough bread is leavened with lactobacillus, which metabolizes the gluten and it actually creates a bread that has a negative impact on the glycemic load of a meal. In other words, eating a sourdough bread will actually lower the glycemic index. Beans are the cornerstone of every longevity diet in the world. If you want to go out and buy a supplement, go buy 2 pounds of lentils. Eating a cup of beans a day not only has the sort of nutrients, it's high in fiber, it's high in protein, it sets up the gut flora the right way, but it also tends to push out the less healthy proteins. I think it's a really big idea. And guess what? Everybody can afford beans. It's a lot easier to afford than going out to eat. You can make a delicious meal, and I have recipes on my site that will show you how to make a meal that'll blow out a fast food meal in taste and cost and in health. They snack on nuts, a handful of nuts every day, or fruit. Greens, in one of our blue zones, most highly correlate with extra life expectancy. This is an Icaria. And then when it comes to what they drink, water, the Adventists will tell you drink 6 glasses a day. Teas, all kinds of teas, herbal and black teas. Coffee shows up in all blue zones diet except the Adventist. An important source of antioxidants associated with lower rates of diabetes, but not the macchiatos and the mochas and all that other crap. Coffee. And then red wine. So it's not a big surprise to people, but a couple glasses of red wine. But it's important to think about how you consume that red wine. It's a lot healthier if you combine a red wine with a Mediterranean meal. It about triples the flavonoid absorption, as opposed to drinking that glass of red wine immediately following dinner, which sends your insulin levels soaring and give you a better buzz, but not such a great habit every night.